Hey guys, so I checked out an article called Why Black Lives Matter in Kalamazoo, which is a place located in southern Michigan. And essentially, this place started by creating a grassroots movement and is now one of the forefronters of people who really advocated towards this movement. And this article served to give different perspectives, mainly from the people who are protesting, and they kind of spoke out on what they thought about what things have been going on as of late. So mainly an important point that I found was that the protesters said that if they didn't protest, then they would be failing the next generation because it would kind of create the cycle of of the blacks being on the bottom and there being like a dominant race. So that was a main point that I found really interesting. But another thing was that the protesters have quoted and said that they feel a sense of comfort knowing that all people who are gathered here all have a similar goal, but they're also really scared at the same time because they could just be shot or killed at pretty much any time, and they know that they're by putting themselves out there, they're risking their lives. So that was another main thing. And the last point was that in this situation, it's clear that things need to be fixed, but it's not a black and white situation. Like let's put the cop in situation about how a lot of cops have killed a lot of people. They need justice and they need to they shouldn't be doing that, treating white blacks unfairly compared to the whites. But not all cops are bad, and not everything is not everything is clearly wrong and everything is clearly bad. To me, right now, it feels like we're kind of backtracking from the past, and we're kind of like revisiting that like civil rights movement and how like the black people need to like kind of like regain themselves, and it feels like the progress has been made like from back then, but now it feels like they have to redo it almost. Because from the article, how there were a lot of protesters really coming forward, it was similar to another situation where there was like the NAACP and the black churches who were really taking charge, back in the day, and now it kind of resurfaced again with like the NBA kind of like pausing their playoffs, and how they were using their media platforms and their following to really showcase and how they're really pushing forward for this Black Lives Matter movement, which is kind of what all like the protesters were talking about, and how they were trying to like push it in Kalamazoo, which is something I find really interesting because it's almost like a parallel. Like those same like the black churches were the forefronts, and now like the NBA players are now kind of like the forefront movements. So I find that parallel really interesting. But these issues are really important, and we must be talking about this because right now we're at a time where America is supposed to be considered like freedom, and like we're supposed to be a place for equality and all that. But now we're kind of at a place where we're back to that, like black people are being racially discriminated against, and they're getting killed by police, and this should not be the case. And we should really talk about like the American system and the government system in general and how we can fix it. And this is really important to talk about right now during this time. In my opinion, I think that the pandemic has actually really negatively affected this whole situation because the pandemic kind of created like a divide where we're all like now supposed to be at home quarantine, but now people are going out to protest, and it kind of like interferes with people are getting more might get affected by COVID-19. And then it also kind of affected the situation because with COVID, it not only affected just Black Lives Matter, like the whole the protesting and the whole all that, but then it also kind of affected like the Asian community also because of how people were calling it the Chinese virus, or how some people were taking it the wrong way, and how it really affected that community also. So it kind of created this divide between like the Black Lives Matter, like it's hard for them to like protest, and then also for the Asian community, people were saying like calling that is pretty racist, and you shouldn't really be calling that in the first place. So my personal feeling about this whole COVID-19 and also the Black Lives Movement is that it really sucks, just especially since COVID-19 kind of just put us all at homes, and it really sucks to just always hear this on the news and feel like you should be doing more, even though sometimes it's hard to. But it also really kind of puts us in perspective that things really need to be changed. So kind of following into the next question, and how for the past few chapters that we have read, I think it's really important for American society to actually be informed about the past. I think if people can learn more about the past and really educate themselves, then it could really help us in the future. But also people should also understand that we're in a different time compared to the past. We need to just treat everyone equally compared to like back then, because back then there was a lot of divide between, like, every race pretty much had a lot of divisions, but then there's pretty much the one dominant race, which is the white race. There were a lot of different things, like I feel like white privilege and the whiteness and the whole like the stigma. I feel like a lot of white people might not even know about that much, or not even conscious that. I feel like they could really like learn about that and even learn about their own history. That is really important. If a lot of like white people and of course black people too, if they just all, if everyone can all just learn about their own history, that is really useful. I think what policies should be implemented, some policies that could be implemented is pretty essentially just, just it's pretty, it's easier said than done, but just essentially just treating people fairly, not just killing people for just because of their color of the skin, just holding people accountable. I don't have like specific, rules, I guess, but just mainly holding people accountable and just, trying to just treat everyone fairly, not just because of the color of the skin. I feel like that's really absurd, but it's of course much easier said than done. I think what people can do, what I can do, or what people can do to help this issue is mainly just, once again, being informed and learning new info. So everything we're reading in class is very good, but also trying to teach people and try to have people informed. If you see something on the news or on Twitter that is really important, just try to share or like retweet it out, try to get the news spread out. And yeah, mostly just try to open your voice up and try to be a voice to help people.